Before I introduce you to my next guest today, I want to make sure that you're aware of a training and coaching resource to help you increase your productivity, clarify your purpose, and improve your communication skills. It's called the Next Level Coaching and Leadership with Purpose programs. To learn more, simply go to warrenwandling.com, and under the programs tab, you'll find both of those resources. Again, that's WARRENWANDLING.com. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of How to Become an Obstacle Buster. I'm your host, Warren Wandling, the show that's dedicated helping leaders to overcome their obstacles, build resilience, and achieve success. And I have a phenomenal guest with me to help us do that today, Gerald Leonard. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, Warren.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to connect with you because you really have a fascinating background, but you specialize specifically in the topics around productivity.
Yes.
But as the publishing editor and CEO and founder of Leonard Productivity Intelligent Institute, where you focus on enhancing productivity and building better workplace cultures, tell our audience a little more about your business.
Sure. And I'm also the CEO of a company called Turnberry Premier, which provides consulting services. And that's kind of like the foundational company. And in both companies, honestly, are focused on how do we help people accomplish more every day, but do it in such a way that they can thrive and that they're not experiencing burnout as they try to achieve more. And it's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart because of a situation I went through in 2018. And I'll just share that story with you really quickly here, and with anyone who's listening. And so I was at a weekend retreat, and it was in August, and I woke up that morning, jumped in the shower, and everything turned upside down. I was rushed to the hospital, and after a day and a half of being examined, the doctors looked and said, "Hey, can you use this walker to show that you could walk down the hall or scoot yourself down the hall? Because if you're not mobile or if you can't use this, we can't let you go." So I was able to do that, but without the walker, I had literally lost the ability to walk because I had had a major bout with vertigo. And the vertigo wiped out my vestibular system in my right inner ear, which is obviously a part of the brain. And it happened 6 weeks before I was to deliver a TEDx talk. And so I've been approved to deliver this TEDx talk. And if anybody's done any kind of those major talks, three or 400 people interview or audition, and they say, okay, these 29 or 27 can do the talk. And so I'm like, I got to figure out how to do this. So I'm back at home and I'm in bed. I'm the sole breadwinner for the family. I'm an independent consultant. I can't look at my laptop. I can't look at television. I felt like someone hit me in the head with a baseball bat and I was on a boat in the middle of the ocean. That's what it felt like.
I'm sure that, yes.
So as I'm sitting there and laying there, I start rehearsing my talk because that's the only I could do is think, right? And so one thought was, I can't stay like this. I got to change because this is not going to work. And what my talk is I'm a musician. And so my talk is, what if practice is the performance? Because most musicians spend 95% of their time practicing. Even the most professional musicians are on the stage 5% of the time. And so as soon as I could get up, I used the walker and the walls to hold on. I went and grabbed my bass and I started playing a little bit, think I can still play. And every day I would play some and I would walk with the walker and I would walk eventually without the walker. And 3 weeks later, I walked into my doctor's office unassisted. And 3 weeks after that, I was able to walk on stage and deliver that TEDx talk. When I was diagnosed, the doctor told me that if I had not used music and been a musician and done the things that I was doing with the goals that I had, that it would have taken me 2 to 3 years to get back on my feet. And so
Wow,
I started the Leonard Productivity Intelligence Institute after that because I eventually ended up having an investment in my Turnberry company that allowed me to be able to do that. But I started it because I wanted to share the lessons I learned in rebuilding my life after this incident because it left me with a constraint. My doctor called it a disability. I call it a constraint. And that constraint was that with the imbalance of the vestibular system, I had the energy to do 2 or 3 things a day. I had to take naps. I had to really balance and work out my life. And a lot happened during that time. And what I had to do, and honestly, I had no choice. I guess I did have a choice, but the choice I chose was to work on me and not work on a goal, work on accomplishing something, work on producing something, but to work on my mindset, work on my energy level, work on meditating, work on me, and also making a decision that I wasn't just going to go through this process of rehab, but I was going to grow myself through this process. And I wasn't going to get bitter at life or the situation that happened. I was going to focus on getting better. And by making a decision to get better, not bitter, and to grow through this challenge and not just go through the challenge, all the things that I had been wanting and trying to and going after started coming to me. And having a company invest in my company, getting my second and my third book published, um, being coached by Les Brown, being interviewed by Jack Canfield, all those amazing things started happening, and I was doing less than I was doing before, but I was being more than I was being before. And so the formula of being productivity intelligence, or my podcast, Productivity Smart, really came to life for me when I really understood the principle of I need to believe it to see it. And I don't need to see it to believe it. I need to believe it, but I need to believe it consciously and subconsciously. I need to believe it emotionally. And I had to have some actions go in that direction, but I don't have to do everything. Because if I'm in that state of being, then I can actually begin to attract the resources, the people, and the things that I need to accomplish the goals that I'm trying to pursue.
Yeah, that is a fascinating story. So you shared a lot of great content. Like that's like a workshop in like 3 minutes. Like there's so much to be able to unpack, right? Like
Yeah.
you use the word to like frame it out, to thrive. But the key was, first of all, you made the decision.
Yes.
And then you also decided it was working on yourself and your mindset.
Yes.
Can you dig in just a little bit further some strategies that you use? Because mindset, obviously, it's a broad brush in reference to the
Sure.
interpretation of mindset. So
Sure.
because someone can have, like you mentioned, you truly believed it before you could see it. So
Sure.
how do you really tap into that to help our listeners to overcome those obstacles, if it's around productivity or?
Sure. And so as I'm laying on bed and I'm thinking about my talk, and again, my talk, you can go out to the TED platform and type in
Yeah.
Gerald Leonard and TEDx, and it'll come up.
Yeah, it's a great TED Talk. If you haven't listened to it, listeners, make sure you listen to it because there's some great content there.
Yeah, thank you. And if you watch it really closely, you'll realize that I'm very deliberate in how I turn, and I'm not moving a lot around the stage at all because I couldn't.
That's very
I
fascinating.
was still really impacted by the vestibular imbalance, but I was determined to deliver that. And that was one of the first things. I resolutely made a goal that I was going to do it. I just made a decision because I just knew laying in bed and even using the terminology when the doctor said you have a disability, I did not embrace that term. That's your diagnosis, but that's not my diagnosis. And honestly, because I had studied Elliot Goldratt's concept, something called the theory of constraints, and
Yes.
I'd gotten certified in it, and I understood the principle of a constraint. The principle of a constraint is like watering your garden. If you take your water hose and just turn it on without a nozzle on at the end of it, the water just pours out, and it's really not that effective use of water. But if you put a nozzle that you get from Home Depot or somewhere like that, put it on the top of it and turn it to spray, it uses so much less water. It constrains the water, but it sprays so much more and covers the garden and or flower bed or whatever you're trying to water in a much more efficient way and uses less resources. So that's the concern. That's the mindset of a constraint. So with that mindset, I'm thinking, okay, what can I do with my limited resources, my energy? I can still play, I can walk, but I only have so much energy. Like the day of the rehearsal, I came in early and did the rehearsal for the TEDx, and I told the person who was producing the TEDx event, I need to go back and go to bed because if I'm going to spend time the next day or that evening and have dinner, it's not going to work. And so I really had to focus on my mindset and the way that I looked at things, and really looking at it from a perspective of one, I can't just stay here in bed. Two, I got to set a deliberate goal. Three, I needed support. I needed people around me. And quite honestly, I went through that whole journey over the next few months and so on. I went through it, ended up going through a divorce because my spouse didn't support me during that time and some of the things that I went through. And even with that, I had to make a decision: do I get bitter or better? Do I go through it or grow through it? And because of making the decision to get better, I made sure that as things happened, that she would be taken care of, and that within a short period of time, there was someone new in my life. And when everything was said and done and the home was sold, I gave her everything that she needed. And within a short period of time after that, I had an investment in my company. And within a short period of time after that, I'm in a new home. And literally, it was making a decision to go after the goal. But now I'm with this constraint. I also realize that I can't use the same tactics that I used before. I'm a trained project manager. I have a PMP, project professional certification.
Sure.
I've actually wrote
Yeah.
a course, and I'm a certified project portfolio man. So I know this stuff. I know how to plan a project, waterfall. I know all of that stuff, but I couldn't use that model because trying to think, okay, well, I'm going to plan this out. I got to do this. I couldn't do all of that. And so all I could do was say, this is my goal of what I want to do. And I had to keep it in front of me. And I learned from another buddy of mine that he learned from Brian Tracy, which was to turn your goal into an affirmation. I'm so
Yes.
grateful and happy and excited that I'm doing this, blah, 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 blah. But then I would then write it out by hand every morning. And then I took a program with Dr. Shilley and a lady named Dr. Bobby Stevens, where they talked about the power and the value of yoga in the morning, because yoga de-stresses the body on a regular basis. I did it today, and there's a few exercises, but when I'm doing it, it releases the stress from my body, so that when my body's less stressed out and I'm in a meditative state and I'm writing out my goal, I get all these intuitive thoughts. I'm vibrating at another level. I've also incorporated writing out a gratitude, at least 5 things I'm grateful for before I can start my day. So it puts me in a place where now I'm looking around and saying, I'm thankful for this, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for this. And, I'm even thankful for what happened, because of that, it put me in a different place in life. I would have never learned the things that I've learned, and would have never started, the Leonard Productivity Intelligence Institute, and dug into neuroscience and dug into kinesiology and dug into brain gyms and energy management and understanding quantum physics. All of those things that I dug into, I would never have dug into them if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So when you're working with clients, what's the greatest obstacle that you help them to overcome?
So when I working with clients, a lot of it is just like on individual coaching. A lot of it's just internal alignment. Internal alignment. And here's what I mean by that. Many times, when we're thinking about the obstacles that we have to bust, right? Many of those obstacles are obstacles that are internal. Les Brown has a saying where he says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy without can do us no harm. In other words, if I have a goal And let's say it's to make a certain amount of money or to do a certain job or be an entrepreneur or whatever. And I set that goal, but when I write out that goal and I think about that goal, I have this little quiet voice in my head that goes, "You can't do that. You're not good at that. You've never done that before. How are you going to do that? Who in your family's done that? All that chatter,
Right.
right? And so you start believing, you start accepting that, and then you go, well, where did that come from? And so what I learned was that I had to then challenge all of those beliefs, all of those non-conscious thoughts that come up and go, where did that come from? And it's really helping people to align so that as a human being that's made up of a body, a soul, and a spirit, three parts, that all of that is congruent and is in alignment to where you're trying to go with your life. And for many of us, we may be looking at our lives and saying, I'm making a decision to go this way, but our spirit or our soul or that non-conscious thought, it's going a different direction. And so that's why when you're trying to pursue a goal, it's like you're climbing uphill against your own will or your own body, or you're being sabotaged. And here's the other thing too that most of us don't think about. It's the paradigms in which we live. Most of the paradigms that we have were given to us by our parents, by society, by life, that we've kind of grown up with, but we can actually reprogram those paradigms by, again, affirmations, meditation, but it's repeated. It's not something that you do for a day or two and you go, okay, well, I've written out my goal, I've done it. It's something that I started doing in 2020 after everything that happened and as I was going through this journey, and I really got of earnest on it. And every day I make a decision to do this, my morning routine, and it rewires my brain. It reprograms my subconscious. It reprograms my paradigms of how I'm looking at the world. And because of that, I'm much more in line now with where I'm trying to go with my life. And now all of these different things are happening in an amazing way. There's still stuff that happens, right? You have family members that things happen to. You have life that happens, but it doesn't stop the progress of where you're going, because now you've been able to align yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that many of us struggle with is internal alignment.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. You know what? I agree with, like, when I work with clients also, the it's not one and done. You can't just do affirmations once, like one, a week and then stop and think that it's going to work, right? It's consistent because you got to rewire those new neural pathways. And
Yes.
so, how do you work? Like, do you get any pushback from clients? Just curious if they push back and saying, like, does that really work? Like, in
Oh,
that
sure.
process of using that strategy?
Sure. There are people that question it and or and doubt it, but when they look at when you tell them your story, or I tell them my story, and I say, "Here's what life was like beforehand." Did I do the study? Did I do the cert? I mean, look on the wall. I did. Do I do the certifications? Yes, I've taken tons of certifications, tons of classes. Am I a trained, certified project manager? Do I know how to get? Yes, I know how to get those things done. But was it always enjoyable and stress free? No, it wasn't always enjoyable, and it wasn't always stress free. But because now I've learned how to align those parts of my body, my mind towards where I'm going, life is a lot easier. And it doesn't mean that every morning you wake up and like, oh, here we go again. Rah. I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, here we go again. We're going to make the donuts. We're going to write out our goals. And then you get into it, you start meditating, and you build up your energy, and you're like, okay, all right, this is feeling pretty good. Because what you're doing again is you're reprogramming all those years, right? And depends on how old we are and who we are. If we're in our 20s, you're reprogramming 20 years of stuff that your parents taught you that may not be the direction you want to go in, that you're trying to rewire. Right. That's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen really fast if you're disciplined about following the process and understand that it's a process.
Right. So I'm really curious. What's your insight that you can share of how you can master productivity to unlock a leader's potential for their success?
Mastering productivity is more than just getting a lot of stuff done. To me, mastering productivity is about using your limited resources to get the most important things done. And it's really about two things. It's about reaching the destination for whatever objective you have, but it's also enjoying the journey of that destination. Many people can at times will have a goal. I want to get married. I want to buy a home. I want to buy a second home. I want to build a business and so on and so forth. And they start this journey and their focus is on the goal. Okay, when I get to that point, then I'll be happy. And that's the wrong way to go about it. The goal is something that you should accomplish, but the main goal of a goal is who will you have to become to attract that into your life.
Yeah, that's really good.
That is the goal. That's the goal, like literally the goal
Uh-huh.
inside the goal. And
Yes.
you also have to have a goal that as you're going through the process, you enjoy the journey. Like I said, I'm a musician. Even the most professional musicians who are playing all the time, if you look at how many hours or minutes they're on stage a week compared to the rest of their lives in a matter of time of preparing and practicing and administrative or whatever they have to do, they are probably only on stage 5% of the time. So if you don't enjoy, so if you only enjoy the stage and you don't enjoy the rest of the stuff, 95% of the time you're going to be miserable. You're going to be frustrated, right? But if you enjoy the journey and the process and the practicing and the rehearsing and the writing of the song and the editing and all the travel and all the things that go along with it, and you enjoy the experience of being on stage, then you got a beautiful life. Now, is every day going to be exciting? And no, it's like with anybody else's job. It's like life happens, but you're going to experience so much more of that bounty than if you were just focused only on the destination.
Right, exactly. So that kind of ties into the growth mindset.
Yes.
So, what are some of your opinions around having the growth mindset impacting the leader?
The growth mindset is really critical because what the growth mindset is, it looks at everything that happens as a stepping stone to your success. So every failure that or learning experience is really not a failure, right? It's only a failure when we stop at that point. If we do something and it stops, we fail, and it's like, okay, well, I failed. I'm not going to ever try this again. Then it's a failure. But if it's a alternative way of us trying to figure out how to get something done and it doesn't work, we just learn one way of doing something that didn't work. But we also learn some things in the process. And so that's a big part of it. And Angela Duckworth, who wrote the book Grit, right, a lot of people know that book. She said that was one of the things when they did research with a lot of the kids who are in school and other adults to say what was the thing that allowed them to have a growth mindset. It was that they had grit. They had the ability to say, I'm going to keep going no matter what. And so the growth mindset is also realizing that we are all born geniuses. And as Les Brown would say, we all have greatness within us. And that's really true. You think about the mathematical calculations that our eyes perform and our brains perform for our eyes to, you know, focus on looking at a screen and reading something and looking at a distance. Those are all mathematical equations that our brain is just non-consciously performing. You know, our brains know how to keep our heart beating, our lungs pumping. So we're all like walking geniuses. And so it's really just saying, okay, how do I tap into the genius that I'm already am, right? And expressing that and realizing that no matter who you are and what planet, what continent you're from, or what color you are, or where you are in life, we all have the ability to grow. We all have the ability to change. some things won't happen overnight. Some things will happen overnight. Some things won't happen overnight, but by consistent effort, moving forward, stumbling forward, falling forward, we can grow and we can be different and we can see that growth. And once you get bitten by the bug that
Yeah.
we all have the ability to grow, that's when life gets really interesting and fun and sweet because no matter what it is, I can grow into it.
Yeah. That's really important in reference to our listeners. If they're overcoming that obstacle, is to have that
Exactly.
growth mindset
Exactly.
and to be able to, if someone else figured it out, they can figure it out.
Exactly. If there's someone else out there that has done what you're trying to do, then there's a roadmap. It's just a matter of identifying what it is, finding the books, finding the person, listening to their stories, watching their movies, whatever, however you get that information, there's a roadmap of how to get to that from point A to point B because we were all born, you know, naked and dumb, right? We're just an empty vessel. We're all born the same way. And it's what gets poured into us or what we then have to pour into ourselves.
Right. So in your TED talk, you share that it really is a powerful message. And you share a message of understanding the benefits of deliberate practice, because you already mentioned that, being deliberate to practice. Can
Sure.
you kind of expand upon that idea of deliberate practice? Because I think
Sure.
there's some really key principles there.
Yeah. Deliberate practice is the principle of I'm going to rehearse or practice, but I'm not just going to pick up my instrument and just play the same thing over and over again every day for whatever reason. It's actually saying I'm going to have a goal for what I'm trying to accomplish. Maybe I'm learning a new song, and so and it's technically difficult. So I'm going to practice it slow so I make get all the parts right and I know all the fingering and I'm going to kind of try to practice to the point where I embed that into my non-conscious. In other words, my body learns how to play it, right? So I can stop thinking about it. Because when you're in the middle of playing and you're really playing fast and loud or whatever you're doing and it's just like, you're in flow, you're not thinking about the notes that you're hitting. It's like your body's memorized that. And so how do you get your body to do that? And it can be done in any field, not just in music, but it's the deliberate practice, setting a goal of, okay, I'm working on this piece and this is a little difficult. So I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to practice it over and over again. And okay, now I got that. And then you walk away from it and let your brain process it and you come back to it. And so it's a way of practicing anything, whether it's being a writer, a speaker, an author, an engineer, a developer, any skill that's a technical skill, it can be learned and you can use this concept of deliberate practice. And once you set your mind to deliberate practice, and your brain knows your intent is to practice deliberately and focus, the brain begins to quell down any of those other sounds and noises so that you can focus. So having this intent of, okay, I'm going to work on this for 5 minutes. I teach something in my podcast called the Pomodoro technique, where
Oh,
you work for
yes.
25 minutes on something. That's kind of a deliberate practice.
Uh-huh.
If I set my alarm and say I'm going to work on a chapter of my book or I'm going to work on this project for 25 minutes and I go for it, then I'm putting myself into a flow state. My brain goes, okay, this is really important. Everybody else be quiet. It calms down the body. It calms down all the noise so that you can focus and move this activity forward. And that's really the essence of deliberate practice.
Yeah, I love that principle, because it focuses that there is really truly power in focus, and
Right.
but having more intensity in that process of what you're trying to really to accomplish.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
within leaders, there's also a level of success, and I believe success leaves clues.
Yes.
And one of those clues are the books that leaders read. So
Yes.
I'm just really curious, just maybe just a few. Maybe what are some of the books that have really influenced you in your career?
I would say one of them is a book by a gentleman named Elliot Goldratt, The Goal.
Oh yes, uh
Right.
huh, yeah,
And when I wrote my book, Symphony of Choices, I used that framework of writing it as a novel to explain something very complex, uh, and teach a principle through the life story of a character. Um, I would also say Think and Grow Rich, and that the model of Think and Grow Rich is not just about money,
Right.
right? Because the whole concept is think
Uh-huh.
and grow. Now rich could be financial, but it could also be relational. It could also
Mhm.
be, you growing rich in who you are as a person. You're taking on an abundant mindset, and again, it's not just about how much money you have in the bank. It's
Mhm.
about all the other areas of your life, because there's a lot of rich people out there who are not rich, right?
Right.
They have a lot of money, but they are poor in relationships. They're poor in their relationship with their kids. They're poor in their friendships. They're poor in their health. That's not an abundant. That's not a rich life. And so I really like the book because it really has some tremendous examples of that Napoleon Hill talks about when Carnegie asked him to write the book and pull all the information together. So those are two. Seven Habits.
Oh
Stephen
yeah,
Covey,
that's a classic.
Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. That book was a game changer for me because it really gave me principles of how to manage my priorities. And, there's this thing called time management, which is kind of an oxymoron because none of us can manage time. Time
Right, exactly. Right.
Time is just going to keep ticking. But what you can manage is your priorities. You can manage your schedule, and you can manage your priorities. And so every day I make a list of my activities based on my roles, which is the Stephen Covey model, right?
Right.
And then I will prioritize across all of my activities, across those roles. And I'll ask myself, if nothing else could get done today,
Mhm.
and if I had no energy to do nothing else except one thing, what would make the biggest impact on my life? Not just on my business, not just on my, but in my life, just overall. And because it may not be a project that I'm working on for work, it might be an activity I need to do for my wife. If I
Mhm.
get that done, that's just going to make her life so much easier. It's going to make my life so much easier. It could be something for one of my kids. Or it could be something. It could be a business thing, or it could be something that's not a urgent, critical thing, but it's important. And so by asking yourself every day with your priority list, what is that one thing? And then you go, okay, what's next? If I had that done, then what's the next most important thing? And you may find that you have your roles and you have all the activities, and one is here and two's over there and three's over there. That's fine.
Mhm.
And then one of the exercises I do is every day I rewrite my list. It keeps it in front of me, and I also make sure that my categories of where I'm writing my activities are also aligned with my goals.
Yes, very important.
So if I'm saying that my goal is to be this kind of a CEO for both of my companies, then one of my categories is a global CEO. If I'm a speaker, a virtual, so keynote basis and speaker, then that's one of my goals and areas I'm working on. Then that's also one of my areas that I keep my to-do lists in. So that way, I'm taking the big picture of where I'm trying to go in my life, and now I'm actually mapping it down to my day-to-day to-do list, and that's the list that I look at and I prioritize. And I will write out everything in black. I'll underline the roles in red, and then I will prioritize them in red. So it's easy, so it's visual. So I can look down and say, oh, I have a sea of black and I got a red one, two, three. I can quickly follow the bouncing balls, and if it gets too crowded, I will circle the two or three things that I know I got to get done for that day. Even if I'm not going to get all of the other things done, I still write them out. And here's why: it keeps it top of mind,
Yes.
because otherwise you end up with ending the week and you're like, oh, I forgot about doing that. Oh my goodness. Oh, and some of those things are critical.
Mhm.
And so I found for myself that if I write out my activities based on my roles, prioritize them, and then identify those, again, the one to two to three things that I can get done that day,
Mhm.
and then rewrite the list the next day with those things off because I've done them, I can go back and see progress. So now I'm getting endorphins as I'm scratching off the things that I've done, and I can go back and review it and go, I made a lot of good progress across the board, kind of like running around the bases and touching every plate.
Right. Yeah,
Really?
that's a great strategy, Gerald, that you shared, and keeping it top of mind.
Yeah,
Because sometimes people might think, well, I'm too busy to write it down, right? But actually, the mental exercise is really important to get it to the part of the subconscious.
exactly. And here's the other thing I hear, and I hear this from executives and people who are really, really smart people is I have these goals, I'm working on this, but I can't figure out how to get these other ones in.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why they can't figure out how to get the other ones in is they have them on a big sheet of paper as a goal, but they're not on their to-do list. They're not falling anywhere on the to-do list, so they never get down to an actionable item that they need to do. And even if you're like me, where you're constrained that you can only do 2 or 3 things a day before you have to take a nap and okay, I'm done, I'm spent, then by having those things written down and having those priorities in front of you and knowing that, hey, I used my most constrained resource, my energy, my time, to focus on the most impactful activity that I could, and I got it done, then I can go chill out for the rest of the day and know that I've had a good day and not feel like I have to just be busy, 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 busy doing stuff and burning myself out when I'm actually doing the most important things and using my time wisely. And I can go recharge my battery doing something else.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, are you working on any special projects?
I have a few more books. I wrote a chapter in a book with Les Brown, so I have a book coming out with Les Brown and some other authors, and then I have a new book called Productivity Smarts, where I look at 24 iconic musicians who are the most prolific of the 20th and 21st century, and I am, writing stories about them. And the book is pretty much written. I'm going back and editing it now, and it's looking at the lives of like Frank Zappa and Miles Davis and Stevie Wonder, Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, because this group of musicians, they produce the most music, like records and albums. Prince is a part of that as well. And it's like, what are their productivity superpowers? What did they do in the music industry in their life that allowed them to tour, to perform, but also just to create over and over again all of these amazing songs? And not every song that they wrote was a hit, but because they wrote so many, they have the most hits that are out there.
Oh, sure. Very fascinating. So,
Yeah.
I know our listeners will want to be able to connect with you, Gerald. So, what's the best way for them to be able to reach out?
Sure. They can go to my website, geraldjleonard.com. And if they go /OB, it'll take them to a dedicated page for this podcast that we're doing right now. And there's some free giveaways, some resources. And if they want to get in touch with me, they can. Or if they want to look at some of the books that I've written and check them out on Amazon, they can do that as well.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure, though, that link is definitely in the show notes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. Really, I know we could probably do a second episode because you are a wealth of knowledge.
I
So,
appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's a
I
great
appreciate
question,
your
too.
time. Pardon?
You had great questions, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a great conversation. So, thank you for sharing your tips and strategies, helping our leaders to really overcome their obstacles. Because I think you shared some unique approaches to help them do just that.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, this is your host, Warren Wandling, saying until next time, be an obstacle buster and be resilient.